Welcome, friend. I'm Dr. Grant Wiedenfeld, and I am in the weeds trying to understand Adorno's theory of the culture industry. I'm going to give some background, quite a bit of background, and then um, look at some excerpts from the text. So, in my introduction to film theory lecture, I said one of the reasons that it has the name film theory is uh, the heritage of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, as it's called. Uh, they were they didn't like the term philosophy. Theory was more modern, more engaged. This is a picture of Habermas with students in the 1960s. So let me jump back a little bit further because this is when the culture industry idea comes about. Um, so it was technically called the Institute of Social Research or for Social Research, founded in Frankfurt, Germany, at the University of like a research center at the University of Frankfurt in 1923 by Felix Weil, who inherited money. It was a Marxist study group, so leftist group of intellectuals, and they were interested in doing interdisciplinary work that was between sociology and more traditional philosophy. So a newer kind of social philosophy. Critical theory is the term that is carried on today. So it's more practical in the philosophy in the sense that it's not just trying to understand how things work for the pure sake of understanding. In an ivory tower, uh, you know, it's not our job to intervene in public life. We're just going to understand how it works and get people to understand things and, how what you're actually supposed to do to change things. That's not our business. No, the Frankfurt School, they want to take on this practical purpose of alleviating suffering. So this is their goal: the good life and spreading the good life to more people. But they're different than the social sciences, who might also see themselves as having that goal, and they see the problem with the social science is that they're too, kind of narrow-minded. They're not thinking like philosophers do about, okay, why am I thinking about this the way that I'm thinking about it? Instead of being so specialized and just going out and gathering data, they need to be thinking about, okay, how are we, designing our studies? What does it mean for us to do this study? What are all the dynamics involved in that? Okay, so a lot of the people at the Frankfurt School are professors at the University of Frankfurt. And without getting a lot into German history, this is part of the 20s. We're in the Weimar Republic. So after World War I, the empire has gone away, and we have a republic, more liberal. We don't have kind of monarchy anymore. But there is a very reactionary rightward turn that happens in the 1930s, led by a figure you may have heard of called Adolf Hitler. 1933, he becomes chancellor. The Gestapo sees the institute, the Jewish faculty. They're going to leave the country. They're going to migrate. They become refugees, and many of them are welcomed by the United States. So the institute is more or less in exile during this period. They get an offer from Columbia University in New York City, Ivy League, and its sociology department to host the institute, or at least Horkheimer is leader at the time. It doesn't work out all that well. It's kind of complicated, and some of that complications you can see by imagine Imagine if you were in the Frankfurt School and you show up in the US in the 1930s and 40s. Oh boy. Uh, you might not be allowed to go certain places, be part of certain clubs if you're Jewish. Even if you're Catholic, look at this is, I mean, I'm just looking around on the internet for some striking examples here. Members and guests only, persons, uh, person not members desiring admission. Oh, sorry. Uh, okay. Oh, the last line there. Gentiles, meaning Christians of Northern European ancestry. So no Southern European Catholics, no Irish Catholics, certainly not Jews. Don't even talk about people with brown skin who are not European. Um, so that, Jews not allowed. There's a sign actually from Ontario. So it's going to be hard to be Jewish and feel like the U.S. is the land of the free. And then also being on the left, there is a huge Red Scare that happens, especially in the 40s, after the end of World War II, when the Cold War starts. This is the Red Menace is a famous kind of propaganda film from 1949. There were studies like Red Channels about how the communists are their influence in radio and television. The idea is that it's the enemy. It's the Soviets. They're going to take over. They're infiltrating us. Um, and they need to be expunged. Especially in Hollywood, there was a Hollywood 10 who were blacklisted in 1948, I believe, or around there. And then there's another round of the Red Scare, which is, I think, this photos from later, maybe in the 50s. The Reds are back in Hollywood, and so forth. So these guys who are refugees and their families are Jewish, Marxists, not necessarily receiving such a warm welcome, not feeling like the U.S. is the home of the free for them. Okay, meanwhile, after the war in Germany, the Institute building itself had been bombed out. I don't know the exact story of it, but if the Gestapo took it over, maybe the Gestapo turned it into their own office, and yeah, that would be something you would want to bomb. But they do get a new building constructed in 1950, and a number of refugees come back. Now, there's one thing I want to say about them being communists here, especially at this point. They are in West Germany, and they are not in favor of Stalin, of the Soviet-style communism, of Bolshevism is what that means. Bolshevism, which the Bolsheviks include, Lenin, Stalin, and so forth. And in Bolshevism, this form of communism is authoritarian. There is a political party that represents the workers, and it controls, all aspects of the state. It's a one-party state, and it controls the economy too. So, or partially controls it. So it's not a free market. Frankfurt School, on the other hand, this is not really their belief in how communism works, which is the ideal of kind of equality in the community. They have a more kind of small government ideal, more liberal, and how that would work or how you get there. The first thing is that you have to educate everyone. You can't just take control by force and use propaganda. No, it has to be through honesty, through reason, through education, that then everyone will, treat each other better and share resources better, and make life better for everyone else if everyone acted rationally. Okay, so they're idealists. Um, Now, the two men in the center here are Horkheimer and Adorno. Horkheimer, they're the two that I want to focus on, because they write about Hollywood and about film. So Horkheimer, I tried to find some young pictures of them on the left. Really stylish looking guys here. This photo is probably from the 20s. Horkheimer on the left, he directed the school in the 30s, and then when he came back from 49 until 58, was from a conservative Jewish family that owned textile factories, and then does a PhD in philosophy. Adorno on the right, son of a businessman who dealt in wine, and his mother was a Catholic from Corsica, and musician. Music was important to him. Not only did he do a PhD in philosophy, I think he did a PhD, well, some high degree in music as well, studied composition. But both Jewish heritage, and so no wonder they became refugees. They first went to New York in the 30s, but then in the 40s they go to Los Angeles. And here's a picture of what they find in Los Angeles in the 40s. And this is the time, 1940, 40, 41, 42, 43, that they write their book that talks about film that I'm going to talk about in a second. But you see here, the movies were big. This was the peak of Hollywood attendance in the 40s, during the war, in fact. People would go to the movies, I think, on average, 4 to 5 times a week. Television didn't exist. It was still, really, really cheap. And there was new content, really high quality, coming out all the time. People still lived in cities, kind of downtown areas. And so you see the marquees on the street here. This is I think this was from 1940, the Fighter Squadron, 42 or 44, military movies. See lots of young people, like in the middle picture there. Young women are moving to Los Angeles, just like they are now. They want to become stars, or they just want to go and work out there. This is an awesome, vibrant city to go to. And then there on the bottom right is Verso had put up this picture of Adorno on the beach, which what a hunk. But so did they love it in Los Angeles? Like, movie town, nice and bustling. A lot of soldiers around too. Is this a happy place? No. So this is a slide from my film history lecture, and they are very skeptical of entertainment, because when they had been in Nazi Germany in the 30s, guess what kind of movies dominated the box office? Entertainment, often called the cinema of distraction. You might not get this idea if you have kind of superficial history, and you've only seen Triumph of the Will or something. You think, oh well, I'm sure all of those idiots in Nazi Germany just watch these propaganda films all the time. No, the propaganda films were not very successful at all. Only the most devoted Nazis watched that crap. The rest of the people, they just were along for the ride, and they watched the same kind of fluffy entertainment that people in America watched. So here's an example of a musical called Youth, romantic comedy. Has nothing to do with Nazi ideology. It's, and you see the statistic there where uh, only 17% of the movies made were banned after the war. So that means 83% of movies, just pure entertainment. No like Nazi content at all. So this is why Adorno and Horkheimer are very skeptical of Hollywood being so successful in entertainment at this time. There is some war propaganda, there's some war films, but a lot of it is just pure entertainment. There's this huge war going on, world war, and a lot of the American public just seems to be content to go to the movies and have a good time, and he's really worried about this. Uh, about this scene, not to mention that there is segregation. This idea, land of the free, freedom certainly feels like an illusion for, the Black, Hispanic, anybody non-white, Jewish, poor and oppressed generally. So it was a golden age for some, perhaps, but you can understand why they see some of the same fascist tendencies or, really right-wing potential in the U.S. at this time. So based on this experience that they've had in the U.S. and their experience before in Germany, Horkheimer and Adorno this is just an opus of a book called Dialectic of Enlightenment. Comes out, they shared around in 1944, I think, at first, and then, here's the 1947 German version. And okay, so dialectic is a term from Hegel. In a word, it means back and forth. This kind of double quality. And what does that have to do with enlightenment? Well, remember I mentioned before that they love education, they love reason. Enlightenment, the age of reason, especially key in German philosophy, and in British philosophy too, that we're going to enter this modern age where superstitions are going to fade away. People are going to be educated. They're going to be rational, and everyone's going to have a better share of the good life. People will be more productive, healthier. Okay, so how do we have world wars? We've just had the Second World War now. This shouldn't be happening if we're being enlightened now. So why is that? And their argument is that it's a problem in reason itself. That reason itself can tend to a machine logic. So you can think of kind of all these sort of sci-fi stories where the machines take over. That what happens is everything becomes about optimizing production, moving towards certain goals. This kind of scientific engineering mind that, we just need to develop more technology. That technology can, of course, lead to war, but also just that technology is designed to produce things. For what reason? Why are we making all these things? So we can make money. Why what for? The bigger questions about whether what people are doing get lost in this kind of narrow-minded blinders that get on. We'll get into, so that's just a quick overview of instrumental reason. So, the mind becomes a tool and becomes this automatic tool and robotic. And so what had been reason and enlightening ends up doing the opposite. It turns people into drones or worker bees. So I think it's the second chapter, or maybe the third from Dialectic of Enlightenment, is called The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception. And what their argument is that entertainment media, especially Hollywood, but also music industry, um, they are turning the masses into happy worker bees. Um, I maybe the best example I could think of this is from the Lego movie. Everything is awesome. It's a perfect illustration that through through the kind of programs that these workers watch every day, they're very content in their lives, but their lives are actually not that good. They're just stuck in the same routine, building and rebuilding things for no grander purpose, just for the sake of staying busy like worker bees, and helping out. This is good for the owners who are going to continue to make more and more money. What for? Don't worry about that. The point is to be profitable. Um, so they live in this illusion that they're happy, not really being happy deep down, and or not really having the good life. Um, but they are, seeing movies and stuff makes them docile. Um, and it also keeps them productive. You know, like playing video games is really good for people training people to be programmers and work in IT or something like that. It also makes them good consumers. That they're very very happy to purchase whatever it is being made for them. Okay, that is the argument in a nutshell. Now let's look specifically at the text. I'm not going to look at the original chapter from the 40s. There's a shorter summary article that Adorno wrote in the 60s um, that can be that's maybe a little bit more digestible. So first, this idea of the culture industry, this term, it's a term that he creates. Um, the both of them create. They mean culture in the old sense of, are you a cultured gentleman? Well, that is not true culture. Culture here is fine arts. Um, and what he says in the middle there is that when you have these big industries that are turning artistic creation into this factory process rather than having individual artists. What that means is that um, to the detriment of both, it forces together the spheres of high and low art, separated for thousands of years. The seriousness of high art is destroyed in speculation about its efficiency. Oh, I don't know if we can take a risk on this art film here. That might not be the most efficient way, to tell the story. People might not understand it. This is a little too obscure. We need to have, an efficiently told story so people understand the characters, so they'll be satisfied at the conclusion and get their money's worth. And so this is the efficiency. Meanwhile, the seriousness of the low art, popular art, perishes with the civilizational constraints imposed on the rebellious, resistant, inherent within it, as long as social control is not yet total. In a word, it can't be actual popular art that is resistant, created by people that just want to, stick it to the man, because it's too corporate. Like, this is the man. Whatever turns out can't be actually resistance. So it's the terrible middle ground. It's terribly middle brow as well. It's neither the highbrow smart stuff, nor is it the low brow like stick it to the man and these smarties either. Okay, Now, there's an illusion here. Nobody would go and see movies uh, if this is how it felt to us. It feels like, oh, they're giving us what we want. But he says no. The customer is not king, as the culture industry would like to have us believe, not its subject, but its object. How this works is that the industry tells you what to like. Uh, so this is the illusion that you're getting what you like. Well, your taste has been formed by the industry itself, and you've developed a habit like a drug, like tobacco or something, and or junk food. It's bad for you, but you just crave it. Um, okay, now what is the problem with all this stuff that they're making? Now, they're not doing general examples here. This is kind of a big picture of how the whole society is structured. And what they, comparing it to, authentic, true art, uh, that art is organized intrinsically. It's, the parts fit together into some special whole just because that's a good way to do it. It just makes sense as an artist to do it that way. Uh, it's harmonious in the end. The harmony is actually a great theme from Confucius too. Um, the problem with okay here is that the entire practice of the culture industry, just continue from that line, transfers the profit motive naked onto cultural forms. So in this whole paragraph, he's saying, used to be that, you know, it wasn't pure autonomy. There was never pure art. There were always some sort of secondary interests involved, whether that was making money or pleasing a patron or so forth. But if it was good art, it did have this intrinsic value. That those extrinsic values, those interests that are outside the work itself, they were kind of secondary, sort of beside. Well, now when we get to the culture industry, you no longer have those secondary. Sorry, you no longer have that autonomy. Um, it's it is lost. So the whole purpose is just those external things to make money, to make the company look good, or what have you. Um, there, and that's because he doesn't explain here, but you could say that it's because the factory making these movies is ruled by money men, not by artists, and because they're so expensive to produce, it has to be. You know, no artist has enough money um, uh, to be able to waste. I love this line at the end here. Brought to bear is a general uncritical consensus. Advertisements produced for the world so that each product of the culture industry becomes its own advertisement. It serves no higher purpose. It's just there to advertise itself. And boy, this certainly feels true with all the advertisement that one sees and the franchise films. Yeah, on the next page, this same line comes in here about technique. And originally, technique is not about technology. It's about how those different parts are organized in the work. Um, the design of the characters in a dramatic film, the way that the story plays out. Um, it isn't designed around stars who are marketable or some sort of intellectual uh, property that people own, but just a good idea in and of itself. Um, okay, so what kind of movies do they make? Uh, Always the same at bottom. This idea of formula comes along a lot. Now, What parades as progress in the culture industry, as the incessantly new which it offers up, remains the disguise for an eternal sameness. So even though things look different, it seems like, oh, these movies are becoming more artistic nowadays than they used to be a few years ago. And, now there's some real artists in there that can actually do what they want. No, he doesn't buy it. The differences are just on the surface. That is just a disguise for what is in fact the same. Because for him, the interest is always the same: profit. That's what hasn't changed. You can juggle around the pieces, but if you don't have that core of autonomy, then you can't really have anything unique and original. These are just going to be, different business decisions to try and make a profitable product. That's it. The same kind of disguise is related to individuality, both of the artists and of the consumers. So he says here, talks about this perennial conflict between artists and those who control it. So they have some leeway. The artists they have some amount of choice, just enough so that they feel like they are free. But in fact, at the end of the day, it is still controlled by the corporate industry overall. This kind of broad logic. Each product affects an individuality itself serves to reinforce ideology, insofar as the illusion is conjured up that the completely reified and mediated is a sanctuary from immediacy in life. So the illusion is that, this is individual. I have a very special taste in the kind of movies that I like, whereas most people, they're into, horror films, or they're into Marvel films. Well, me, I'm different because I'm into alternative films. I'm into art films. Well, for Adorno, this is just an illusion. This is, just a fancier product for some, for some people who don't like the one product. Okay, they'll make another kind of product here for you that makes you feel different. We're going to sell you the jeans that are ripped, that make you feel like, I'm a rebel. But you've just bought these, jeans that are not, standard and clean looking, but they've been ripped by the company themselves. So that's just like a kind of popular fashion equivalent to, I feel like I'm totally different from everything else. For Adorno, and this is a pretty cynical opinion, he would say, no, this is just a different type among a set that are for sale. And you are fooling yourself if you think that you can be individual in the society, because the whole society itself is ruled by this kind of instrumental reason, and he's going to hold true to that and just keep pressing. He's a real hater, but he sticks to a higher purpose in the end. And we'll see here at the end of it. His idea is, at the end of the day, the life of most workers is not good. They're overworked. They don't get paid enough, and there are some people who are, like investors, are making all kinds of money without even working. That's not fair. So he says, without admitting it, he's talking about workers here, they sense that their lives would be completely intolerable as soon as they no longer clung to satisfactions which are none at all. So he's saying it's a false satisfaction of these movies, kind of like junk food. Going back up the page, I love this. The phrase, "the world wants to be deceived," has become truer than had ever been intended. People are not only falling for the swindle, it guarantees them even the most fleeting gratification. If it guarantees them that fleeting gratification, um, they'll take it. So, he's saying that people are really so desperate that even though they know this is not really nourishing food, this is not good art, well, they'll take it nevertheless. Boy, have I felt this way sometimes when you just like you're feeling down and you're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do, and well, maybe I'll turn on this thing, and it's not satisfying, but you keep watching it anyway. Um, that's kind of the feeling that he's talking about here. How it's kind of you're desperate, but it trains you to cope with suffering. Um, this is the kind of opiate for the masses theme that shows up here. Okay, in the next paragraph, interesting turn, he talks about how what the culture industry does is it imitates authentic popular culture and in fact ruins it. And I love this line here: the color film demolishes the genial old tavern, the neighborhood pub, to a greater extent than bombs ever could. The film exterminates its imago, its image. No homeland can survive being processed by the films which celebrate it, and which thereby turn the unique character on which it thrives into an interchangeable sameness. Okay, this is conformity, and a good illustration of this might be a TV show like Cheers. It was on NBC, 1982 to 1993, very successful, and it's a sitcom set in a neighborhood bar in Boston. I think it's Ted Danson is in the center there, the bartender, main character Woody Harrelson, the younger guy from the Midwest who's there, and so going to watch. So it's an imitation of an actual pub, and going to watch this sitcom becomes an imitation for an authentic experience of hanging out with other adults in your neighborhood and interacting with them. Now you're just sitting at home watching those interactions that have been pre-programmed by the writers for the show. And to take it one step further, how does that demolish the actual neighborhood bar? Well, every neighborhood bar then becomes a chain restaurant like Applebee's. Here's an advertisement from Applebee's. Here's to the regulars. We wouldn't be here without you. Eating good in the neighborhood. We'd love to have you here. It's this illusion of neighborhood feeling. When in fact, when you go to Applebee's, you only ever interact with people at your own table, and it would be so weird to talk to someone else, as if it was a neighborhood where you actually, interacted with your neighbors. So, I'm jumping off from what he's saying here, but just thinking about how, it's not specific to the film, but it's the logic of the whole system of capitalism to turn everything into a factory, into a chain. All of the art, all of the restaurants, and you just as a worker bee, everything is awesome. You're supposed to go about your business and just accept it. So there ceases to be that space for kind of resistance and free thought and autonomy that he thinks is so important. And I'll get to that in a second. One other thing you could say is that something like Applebee's, how they design the restaurant probably imitates the sets on Cheers, which are imitating some actual bars in Boston. So everything becomes a copy of a copy, in this concept of what a neighborhood bar is. It becomes this facade, this illusion that feels unique to you, but it's designed from above. Okay. Now, another interesting aspect of this argument is that politically, Horkheimer and Adorno argued that the culture industry, these big business, tends to conservative politics. Um, they're certainly seeing this in Nazi Germany, where some big business people supported Hitler, but they're and maybe they're seeing this in the U.S. too, but it's not necessarily from evidence. The reason that they are not, they're not just deriving this from empirical evidence and examples in these two places. They're looking at the logic of it overall in a philosophical, sociological kind of way. So why would there be a conservative tendency? And okay, here's the concept of order, which it hammers into human beings, are always those of the status quo. Why would these big businesses like the status quo? Well, again, in terms of instrumental reason, optimizing, the business, that is going. What is more optimal than the status quo, where you have regular consumers who you can count on to come back in and buy the product as you're making it. You have regular workers who are going to, show up to work on time. They're not going to protest. They're not going to go on strike. They don't want to rock the boat. They're just going to, go to work, do my job. I don't want anything to change. I don't want to shake up the system. And so in this way, the power of the owners and their privilege is not threatened by any kind of change. They're in an advantageous situation where they're making money that they're squeezing off of the workers, and they don't want that to change. I'm going to continue to, and this would be like the monopoly tendency would be, to just have that set thing, and if you just keep producing and producing, you will, amortize all of your costs on your equipment and optimize and just make the maximum amount of money. Okay. One way that this shows up, and here he connects it to the content of films, is that the second line I've highlighted there. While it claims to lead the perplexed, it deludes them with false conflicts, which they are to exchange for their own. It solves conflicts for them only in appearance, in a way that can hardly be solved in their real lives. So, real life conflicts like class, which I've been talking about a lot, or race, or gender, or just power generally. Instead of dealing with those conflicts and how citizens could engage in solving those problems, making life better for everyone, instead you get these substitute conflicts in the content of a movie, whether it's some serial killer, or it could be some fantasy heist, or just a romantic conflict, that those the dissatisfaction that people carry around gets almost sublimated into some other kind of conflict and then resolved, and so that makes people say, well, I guess everything is awesome. We'll continue with life as it is. No, not going to strike, not going to rock the boat, that sort of thing. He also mentions Plato later on this page, but I'm going to skip over that. Okay, last couple slides here, the last couple pages of this article. Adorno is making the claim that, actually, slightly out of order here, at the top of the page, it is no coincidence that cynical American film producers are heard to say that their pictures must take into consideration the level of 11-year-olds. In doing so, they would very much like to make adults into 11-year-olds. So here's this kind of lowest common denominator argument that if you're going to make content for the masses, on whatever it is, the bigger the film, the dumber it has to be. And then if everybody is constantly consuming content that was created for 11-year-olds, then their mind is going to, kind of regress or settle to that level of the 11-year-old. And this is going to have, a bad effect at large. Sociology is trying to think about, statistically, what are the big effects that come from this. He talks a little bit. Now, some people say that entertainment is harmless, and he has a great little reply here. If an astrologer urges his readers to drive carefully on a particular day, that certainly hurts no one. They will, however, be harmed indeed by the stupefaction which lies in the claim that advice which is valid every day and which is therefore idiotic needs the approval of the stars. So yeah, that's good advice, but it has nothing to do whatsoever with the position of the stars. And obviously here he doesn't believe in astrology. He thinks this is a dumb superstition, and so it is. This entertainment in the same way is kind of leading people to believe in superstitions, to follow sentimentality, and so forth. Now, something that doesn't come up in this article, but that they talk about in the book, is that one of the purposes of this dumb entertainment with the 11-year-old in mind is that it can optimize our coordination, like our eye, hand, brain coordination. I think I mentioned before, how video games would be good training for anybody who's going to work on a computer. He's writing this back in the 40s, but he sees that with movies, the sense that, people who watch movies and then go to work in the factory, the same way that you're kind of, your eyes are following the Buster Keaton character from each cut to each cut, and, hitting on the beats of all the laughs. That kind of rhythm is the same rhythm that you need to be a more efficient worker in your factory job. Okay, now he gets to the main claim of the argument here, toward the bottom of the page. The total, well, let me go above. Insofar as the culture industry arouses a feeling of well-being that the world is precisely in that order suggested by the culture industry, everything is awesome. The substitute gratification which it prepares for human beings cheats them out of the same happiness which it deceitfully projects. So they aren't actually happy. They're just, getting this substitute image of happiness, kind of empty calories. The total effect of the culture industry is one of anti-enlightenment. Dumbing down. So which, as Horkheimer and I have noted, enlightenment, that is the progressive technical domination of nature. This is the kind of scientific production aspect of nature, becomes mass deception and is turned into a means for fettering consciousness. Now let me slide that up and put in the next page here. Fettering consciousness. So fettering is like narrowing, like putting blinders on, brakes on brain, on cognition, in the way that it's training everybody to be 11-year-olds and not to ask any questions or rock the boat, but just to be happy with this kind of empty calorie substitute image of happiness that they can go home or go out to the movies and consume. It impedes the development of autonomous, independent individuals who judge and decide consciously for themselves. These, however, free-thinking individuals would be the precondition for a democratic society which needs adults to have come of age in order to sustain itself and develop. So you're not going to have democracy, you're not going to have freedom unless you have, a populace who's educated, if everybody's in the mentality of 11-year-olds, then voting and other kinds of representative democracy are not going to work. The voters are going to be persuaded by dumb advertisements and all that. So there's a little bit of a condescension here, and worry about people being deluded. But the point of his article is, in fact, to break you out of those illusions and to have those questions and to think for yourself. This is the first kind of breaking out of the matrix here, of breaking out of the cave allegory. Breaking out of the cave is to read this and to kind of realize this system around you. Now, this is radical thought is always going to do that, whether it's on the left or the right. To say that the world you saw before is an illusion. Now you're going to peel back the curtain and see the way things really are. Sure, but just stepping back from that rhetoric, this idea of democracy here is that on an education standpoint, there's too much junk food from the culture industry. It isn't just rotting your brain, but kind of training your brain not to think, not to be able to even understand what real art is. So political change is going to happen by getting smart, becoming conscious of these things, acting rationally, and so forth. To conclude here, a brief comparison to Plato, which I think is relevant. Now, there's a double aspect here, in the sense that Adorno and Horkheimer, I think, are similar to Plato, who says that poetry is bad because it lets the lower base instincts, the passions, the emotions rule over the rational brain. Adorno and Horkheimer have a different version of that argument, that it isn't just all poetry, but specifically, this industrial, mass-produced poetry, dramatic stories that are going to, they're going to tend to those lower instincts and kind of shrivel the mind, so that reason doesn't even know that it isn't functioning anymore. On the other hand, I think that Horkheimer and Adorno are quite against Plato when it comes to their critique of instrumental reason, in that Plato is very much kind of about cold discipline, the mind over the body, always focusing on this higher purpose. That in effect could be maybe the problem that they're seeing, is that there's this too much of a disconnect, too much of this kind of cold rationality, this machine logic that can take over, and in that sense, I would say they're you could say that they're have a position opposite of Plato. So on the one hand, they say that modern life is not rational enough. It is, the masses are too ruled by their emotions. And he agrees on that. On the other hand, modernity is too rational, especially the owners, the rulers, the managers, the people, the professional class who's in charge. Their mindset is too dominated by science. In this, Plato's kind of abstract, ideal world of eternal sameness where nothing ever changes. That's a problem. It lacks humanity. Okay. Last thing I want to say about Adorno and Horkheimer is that before them, I think it was common to think that Hollywood was, in favor of the people. In this sense, it was progressive because it was made for the masses, and so it would reflect their interests. It's going to be, have the worker sympathy, and worker causes, left causes in mind. It's going to lean left. I mean, people also said it leaned left because it had Jewish studio heads, but uh, generally the idea was that if mass art is going to lean left. Well, they are really turning that around and saying that quite the opposite. That all of these mass arts are tending conservative. The politics of them are going the opposite direction, and if they seem to be leaning to the left and being liberal, this is just an illusion that probably everyone within it is caught up in. In fact, they are just serving the interests of the business structure overall, which, from the Marxist point of view, is is always consolidating more control for the owners and squeezing more out of the workers as it can.